Number 5. I moved to my dad's when I was 10, and I didn't know anyone in the area except for the family my dad was friends with. Luckily, they had a daughter just a few years older than me, 12 at the time I met her. We got to know each other over the course of a few years. We weren't close, but we ended up having some of the same friends. One night, my friend Rob was hanging out with her and her younger brother. They were alone in the house because my friend's mom was at work. Her mother had been helping this one lady through her work and got to know her well, and found out that her sister was recently let out of a mental institution. The night Rob was hanging out with my friend, they heard a knock on the door, and my friend just assumed it was her mom because her mom knocked a certain way, and she opened it without checking. Rob wasn't supposed to be there, so he left by going out the window. It wasn't her mom. It was the sister of the lady her mom was helping. She figured out by talking with her sister where they lived and the mom's working schedule. She came in, and the details are unknown after this point, but somehow my friend's younger brother got away with the neighbors to call the police. The police arrived too late. The lady brutally murdered my friend and left her body naked in the bathtub. I wasn't allowed to go to the funeral. Number 4. In an internet cafe in Taiwan where the elevator doesn't include a 4th floor for superstitious reasons, one man entered the elevator to visit the 6th floor, only for the elevator to stop on a mysterious, numberless floor. Pitch black when the doors open, and random pieces of furniture thrown here and there, and in the distance, a figure dressed in a white gown starts moving towards him. The lights turn off in the elevator and he shits his pants. The doors close and the elevator goes to floor 6. He told the cashier about this, and the cashier told him the 4th floor used to be a hairdressing salon before a series of accidents and unexplainable events. The elevators were programmed to never visit the 4th floor, but on occasion it would, and other people confirmed they've seen the same figure approaching them. Number 3. This is the early 90s. I was around 6 years old, and I was with my older sister who was 14 or 15 at the time, and we got along very well. We lived in a small town where everyone knew everyone. My parents let my sister babysit me frequently. We were in the living room watching one of those 60-minute news pieces that follows murderers and psychopaths. The one we were watching is a typical one. Quiet next-door neighbor goes on a rampage and murders his neighbor and kidnaps their daughter. The thing about our living room is that there is a large glass door that leads to the backyard, and without the backlight on, we couldn't see anything but darkness. Our front door is on the other side of the room. Around 45 minutes into the show, they're talking about the ongoing hunt for this lunatic, and bam, 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 someone bangs on the front door like crazy. We jump up scared as fuck and scream. The only lights on are in the kitchen, which is down the hall from the living room, and the light is coming from the television. We're thinking a chair or a couple of planters just hit the door because of crazy strong winds. Right when we are about to declare that everything was fine, we hear our storm door in the front of the house close. Fuck. Someone had to have opened that to bang on the front door like that. We were both frozen in the middle of the room. My sister crawls over to the TV and shuts it off. It was an old TV, and you had to turn the knob to shut it off. We were now frozen in that room, dimly lit by the kitchen light down the hall. I don't remember how much time passed with us both being frozen, just hiding in the living room, but we kept looking at each other, and then at the front door. Then we hear, and I see, the back door knob turn. It rattled as if someone was gently trying to open the door. Neither of us make a sound. We even hold our breath. Then, out of nowhere, we hear someone trying to force their way in by jerking the back door back and forth. An entire wall of windows is vibrating. My sister flips the fuck out and screams. She then grabs me and drags me to her room and throws a mattress on the door. Thankfully, she remembered the phone, but in her panicked state of mind, she cannot remember the number to the police and just hits redial, and it's one of her friends, and she tells them that someone is trying to break into the house. I'm curled up on the floor and cannot stop shaking. We don't hear or see anything else until we see the headlights of the car of my sister's friend and her parents driving to the house. We did not find out who was at the door, and there were no signs of someone being there, except for some scuff marks on the door that we cannot remember if they were there or not. Number 2. I was 6 or 7 years old in my parents' apartment, heading towards the kitchen. So I go towards the kitchen where my mom is talking on the phone, and at the end of the corridor in front of me, I see the door opening and halting because of the door chain, and I thought it was my dad. It was around 11 in the morning, so I think my dad will close the door and ring the doorbell for my mom to open up the chain. And it was weird because I hadn't heard the key turning, except that nobody rings the door, and an enormous hairy hand that doesn't belong to my father tries to pull on the chain immediately, and I understand it's a burglar. I rushed to slam the door with my entire body. There's me slamming against the door with all my 7-year-old strength, panicked out of my mind, and putting all my weight against the infernal piece of wood with a huge burglar on the other side, trying to keep the door open so he could pull the chain off, fingers trying to grasp the end of the chain. My mother completely oblivious about 12 feet away in the next room. I tried to scream to my mother, and I remember yelling muffled pieces of "Mom, Mom," but she thinks I'm horsing around and pays no attention. It's after my 7th or 8th scream, when I was about to give up all hope, when I heard my mom that she will call her back because I've done something and she needed to check on me. The burglar heard her and let me shut the door, and my mom arrives and demands to know what I'm doing. I'm crying at this point, not being able to utter a coherent sentence, trying to point at the door, trying to say "burglar out" or something to that effect. My mother, not getting the hint, comes over and tries to open the door to see what all the fuss is about. As soon as I realized what she was about to do, I try to push her away, crying and sobbing at her. "Don't open the door, there's a burglar outside." I had to fall on my ass and then on my knees and beg her against trying to push me aside before she decided to change her mind and see through the peephole instead. So she looks through it in a hurry and says, "See, there's no one," and I see her very annoyed face turning pale. She grabs me and pushes me aside the door and tells me to go get her phone. I rush to the kitchen. I heard her yell through the door, "I can see you crouching, you're behind the door. I'm not going to open and I'm calling the police." The bastard was still behind the door and crouching as low as he could, making no sounds whatsoever, so my mom would think no one is outside, and as she would open the door, he could rush inside. My mom called the police, and after 5 minutes of my mom issuing threats from the door, we heard someone creeping away from the hallway and down the building entrance and outside the building door. My mom was white as a sheet and not making a sound or expressing any emotion throughout the whole ordeal. After about half an hour later, my father arrived. Oblivious to the whole thing, my mom told him about what happened. My dad went to get a new lock and a better door chain. The police arrived that afternoon, a full 5 hours later. Even though the police station is a 10-minute drive from my house, I don't think the burglar was ever caught. Number 1. I've always been a night person, but I always become bored after my roommate, who was not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that and never once had a reason to feel afraid. But one day, I was walking alone somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, near a police-patrolled park, considerably far from my apartment. It was very quiet, even for a weeknight. The park, as it almost is every night, was empty. I went down a side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I saw him at the far end of my street. It was a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, heading straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I decided to step as close as I could to the street to give him the majority of the sidewalk. The closer he got, I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky, and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still until I could make out his face. His eyes were open wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, staring at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off of him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back at him and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking at the sky, smile still wide. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I put about half a block between us, I turned away for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been, standing to find him gone. For the briefest moments, I felt relieved until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance of the shadows, but I was sure he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked, and I stood there for some time staring at him, and then he started moving toward me again. He took giant, exaggerated tiptoed steps, as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving very quickly. I just stood there, completely frozen, as this smiling man crept towards me, and then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, and still looking to the sky, When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask is, "What the fuck do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. What came out was a whimper. What the fuck? Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can hear it. I heard it in my own voice. That only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there smiling. And then after what felt like forever, he turned around very slowly and started dance walking away. Just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go until he was far away enough to be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him got bigger and bigger. He was coming back my way. He was coming back my way, and this time he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off the side of the road and onto a better lit road with traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be seen. The rest of my way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk or high. He looked completely insane. And that's a very scary thing to see.